90%. I mean, that's the number that just screams at you from the top of the stack of research we're looking at today. About 90% of futures traders fail. And we're not talking about people who, lose a little bit and walk away. We're talking about blowing up accounts, losing savings.
It's a staggering statistic. And what's really scary is who these people are. We aren't talking about people who are bad at math. A lot of them are, engineers, doctors, chess players, people with high IQs who are used to winning in everything else.
Exactly. And that's the first question everyone asks, right? Why? Is it the market, the algos? But the sources we have today argue that if you're asking those questions, you're already looking in the wrong place.
Right. The core thesis across all this material is pretty blunt. It's almost never the strategy. You could give a failing trader a perfect winning strategy, a 70% win rate, and they would still find a way to lose money with it.
What?
The problem isn't the math. It's the wetware. It's all psychology. You aren't paid to click buttons. Any monkey can do that when a line crosses another. You're paid to think clearly when your heart is trying to beat out of your chest.
Which is infinitely harder than it sounds, as anyone with real money on the line knows. So for this deep dive, we're doing something a little different. It's essentially a boot camp for the mind. We've combined two really distinct sources. One is a 30-day psychological boot camp that focuses on what you do outside the markets, and the other is a really deep, almost clinical analysis of revenge trading.
Yeah, that specific emotional spiral that just destroys accounts. It's a fascinating combination because you have this really practical, almost domestic advice like literally how to make your bed. And on the other hand, you have this heavy neuroscience about amygdala hijacks and cortisol.
Right. So we're going to cover how making your bed connects to your P&L statement, why your brain treats a financial loss like a physical attack, and how to rewire your whole identity from a gambler to a professional.
It's a great scope.
I love it. But I want to start with that boot camp idea because, honestly, when I first read it, I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit. The source claims the first step to trading successfully has nothing to do with the charts at all.
It does sound counterintuitive, but the source uses this perfect analogy from The Karate Kid. Wax on, wax off. Remember the movie? Daniel just wants to learn how to punch. He wants to fight. But Mr. Miyagi has him washing cars and painting fences for days. The lesson is you don't just practice the punch, you practice the discipline around the punch.
So in trading, the punch is hitting buy or sell. The wax on, wax off is what?
It's keeping your word. That's the foundation. The source defines it as doing what you said you would do, regardless of your mood. It sounds so simple, but it builds what they call self-trust, and you can't trade without it.
Okay, but here's where I need to play devil's advocate. The source talks about this that girl aesthetic, the TikTok trend. Perfect life, green juice, skin routines. If I'm a futures trader staring at a screen, grinding, that sounds really soft. You're telling me moisturizing is going to save my P&L.
It does sound incredibly soft, I get it. But the logic under it is actually brutal. It's not about the moisturizer. It's about the neural architecture of your brain. The key insight is that discipline is transferable. Your brain doesn't have a separate trading discipline folder and a life discipline folder. It's all the same pathways.
So it's an efficiency thing for the brain.
Exactly. If you can't keep your word to yourself to make your bed, which is a low-stakes, easy task, you're physically weakening that neural pathway. So how on earth do you expect to keep your word when you're in a high-leverage trade, you're down $500, your heart's pounding, and your plan says stop at 2 losses?
If you blew off the small promise, you will absolutely blow off the big one. That is actually terrifying when you put it like that. You're saying hitting snooze is basically practice for ignoring my stop loss?
Precisely. That's the connection. If you say you'll limit screen time, but you doom scroll for 2 hours, you've trained your brain to ignore your own commands. You've created a pattern of non-compliance with yourself. In trading, that's tilting. That's moving your stop loss because you feel it'll turn around. You're just breaking your word again.
So the idea is that a huge chunk of traders, maybe 60, 80%, are right on the edge of success, and the missing piece isn't a better indicator, it's just this basic biological self-trust.
Yes, the source says it explicitly. Control your life before you try to control the market. If your life is chaos, dishes in the sink, random sleep schedule, loose commitments, your trading will be chaotic. You have to build that girl or that guy energy where execution is just flawless because you see yourself as a person who just executes on everything.
Okay, so let's say we do that. We build the foundation. Making the bed, hitting the gym, keeping our word, we feel bulletproof. We sit down at the desk at 9:30 a.m. for the open. and the market just punches you in the face. A bad loss. All that zen is gone. And this brings us to that second, much darker topic, revenge trading.
The enemy. And this is where the boot camp meets the battlefield.
The source calls revenge trading one of the most destructive patterns in human psychology. But what I found fascinating is it's not just being mad. It's described as a biological switch. Can you walk us through what's actually happening in a trader's body when a trade goes wrong?
It's entirely physiological. When you take a loss, especially one that hurts where you felt you were right, your brain doesn't just see a math error. It registers a threat. It immediately releases cortisol and adrenaline. It triggers fight or flight.
Which is great if a tiger is chasing you, but terrible if you're trying to analyze a chart.
Exactly. And here's the key mechanism, and this is crucial for everyone listening. The rational part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, the part that knows your strategy, your risk management, it literally shuts down. It goes offline. The amygdala, your primitive emotional brain, takes over the cockpit. You are no longer trading. You are surviving.
The source mentions this idea of loss of agency, that we hate losing control even more than we hate losing money.
Right. Evolutionarily, a loss feels like a social defeat. It's a drop in status. So when the market proves you wrong, your subconscious feels it as an attack on your confidence, your identity. You feel powerless. And what's the quickest way to feel powerful again?
Click the button again.
Click the button again. Do something, anything. Force your will on the world.
The source lays out this specific spiral, and it's almost painful because anyone who's traded recognizes it. It starts with shock or denial. I can't believe I missed that.
Then it moves fast into anger. The market is targeting me. This is rigged. That's a huge red flag when you start personifying the market, thinking it's an entity that's out to get you. The market's just data. It doesn't know you exist. But your ego makes it personal.
And then comes the phase that I think is the most dangerous, bargaining, or what the source calls the delusion of hope.
This is the please just let me get back to break-even phase. I'll get it all back on the next one. That's the voice of hope.
And that leads straight to desperation. This is where you stop trading and start gambling. Doubling lot sizes, averaging down, widening your stop loss. You're breaking all the rules you followed all week. You're trying to force the market to give you your agency back.
And finally, numbness. The account is blown. You're just sitting there staring, wondering what just happened. The source calls it an out-of-body experience. You're watching yourself destroy your account, screaming inside to stop, but your hand just keeps clicking the mouse because you are not in control. The chemical cocktail in your brain is running the show. You've moved from a state of performance to a state of payback. You're not trying to make a profit. You're trying to punish the market for embarrassing you.
This connects directly to the section on the dopamine hijack. I didn't realize how similar this is to a clinical gambling addiction until reading this. The source talks about loss chasing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gambling studies show that when a gambler loses, the brain's reward system shuts down. It drops below baseline. You feel terrible. The only way to restore that chemical balance quickly is to play again. The anticipation of the next trade releases dopamine. So you're not trading for money anymore. You're trading to fix your brain chemistry. You're trading for relief.
And there's a specific word the source highlights that bridges that gap between discipline and destruction. That word is maybe.
Maybe. Maybe I'll recover it. Maybe this time it works. Maybe is the enemy of certainty. It opens the door to the casino.
But here's where it gets really twisted, and I want to spend a second on this. The source mentions variable reward. What happens if you do revenge trade? You break all your rules, double down, and you win.
That is actually the worst possible outcome. It's a catastrophe.
Wait, making money is the worst outcome. How does that work?
In the long run, yes. Think about it. If you break your rules, double your position out of anger, ignore your stop, and you win. You've just taught your brain that impulsive emotional behavior pays off. You get a massive dopamine hit attached to terrible behavior. You've created emotional evidence that bad habits work.
So you're just reinforcing the addiction. You're telling your brain, hey, next time we feel bad, just double down. It works.
Exactly. You're training your brain to ignore the red flags next time. You might win that battle, but you will eventually lose the war because you're building a strategy based on luck and adrenaline, not probability.
The source uses this analogy of the market being a casino without walls.
It's a powerful image. In a real casino, if you get too aggressive, the pit boss cuts you off. The bouncer throws you out. The market never closes. It never tells you that's enough. It will let you trade until your account is zero. You have to be the bouncer. You have to be the one to say, you've had too much, you're out.
So how do we do that? We've built the foundation with the boot camp. We understand the revenge trading enemy. Now we need the solution. And the sources are very specific about what to do when that anger spikes.
The primary tactical solution is simple, but it's incredibly hard to do in the moment. It's the pause.
They call it the response gap.
Right. The rule is, after a loss or a string of losses that triggers that emotional heat, you have to do nothing.
Nothing. Just sit there.
No, not sit there. You have to physically remove yourself. The source suggests a hard timer. 20 minutes. You walk away from the screen. You leave the room.
Why 20 minutes specifically? Is that just a random number?
No, it's biology. It takes about 20 minutes for the adrenaline and cortisol to fade from your system. You are literally waiting for the chemical storm to pass so your prefrontal cortex, your logic, can come back online. The source says doing nothing is a profitable move.
So if I sit back down after 5 minutes thinking I'm calm...
You are lying to yourself. At the 5-minute mark, you are still clinically compromised. Your logic center is still offline.
Yeah.
You need the full 20 minutes. The source even suggests shocking the system, put your hands in ice water, do push-ups, anything to break the trance.
I like that. Doing nothing is an active choice. But there's a deeper shift here, beyond just tactics. It's about identity over willpower.
This is so crucial. Willpower is a battery. It drains. If you're just using willpower to stop yourself from revenge trading, eventually on a bad day when you're tired or stressed, you will break. You can't rely on it alone.
So what's the alternative?
You have to change your identity. The source uses the smoker analogy. If you offer a cigarette to someone trying to quit, they say, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." But if you offer one to a non-smoker, they say, "No thanks, I don't smoke."
It's a subtle difference, but that feels huge.
It's massive. One implies a struggle, the other implies a fact. You need to stop saying, "I'm trying to be disciplined," and start saying, "I'm a disciplined trader." A disciplined trader doesn't chase losses. It's not what they do. It's not an option on the table.
And part of that identity is reframing what a loss even is. The source says we should see it as an operating expense.
This is the mindset of a business owner. If you run a coffee shop, buying coffee beans isn't a loss. It's an expense. It's the cost of goods sold. In trading, losing trades are your cost of goods sold. You pay the market to find out which trades work. When you see it that way, the sting is gone. You didn't fail. You paid your operating cost for the day.
A win isn't making money. A win is following your rules. That's the mantra.
Yes. You can lose money and still win the day if you followed your plan perfectly. And this is critical. You can make money and lose the day if you gambled. You have to detach your self-worth from your P&L.
And this brings us right back to boot camp. The reason you make your bed, the reason you keep your word on the small things, is to build that identity. You're proving to yourself every single day, I'm the kind of person who follows through.
Exactly. It's about building the mental muscle. When the biological storm hits, and it will hit, the market guarantees it, you need that muscle memory. You need to be able to rely on the fact that you were disciplined, not just hope you can hold your breath long enough.
It's a synthesis of the mundane and the extreme. You need the boring, mundane discipline to survive the extreme emotion.
That's perfectly put. The market isn't a battlefield, it's a mirror. That's the final visual the source gives us. It reflects you. If you are chaotic inside, the market will reflect that chaos back at you as losses. If you are disciplined, it eventually reflects that consistency.
That's scary how accurate that feels. You look at the screen and you don't see the price. You see yourself.
And that's why the 90% fail. Not because the market is impossible, but because facing yourself, your real self, flaws and all, is really, really hard.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought from the material. It's the concept of the anchor.
Right. Because here's the reality. When the emotion hits, when the anger rises, you will not remember this deep dive. You won't remember the neuroscience. You'll just feel the heat. So the question is, what is your anchor?
What's the one thing, a physical object you can put on your desk or stick to your monitor? A quote, a wristband, a photo of your family, a sticky note that just says, wait.
Something that snaps you out of that trance. Something that reminds you who you decided to be when you were calm. Because when that fight or flight triggers, you need that external reminder to bring you back. You have to interrupt the pattern.
So find your anchor, make your bed. And remember, you're not paid to click buttons, you're paid to think.
Keep your word.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you on the next one.